Late 1977. Angolan students studying abroad in places like the Soviet Union and Bulgaria get the call to come home. They expect to be welcomed back to help build their newly independent nation. Instead, the moment they step off the plane, they are arrested. Many are loaded into trucks and sent straight to concentration camps. Others are simply decapitated on the tarmac. This chart shows the true scale of what happened next. A standard political crackdown might target a few dozen suspected mutineers, but over the coming months, nighttime raids swept through Luanda's neighborhoods, disappearing tens of thousands of young people. The final death toll is estimated to sit between 30,000 and 80,000 citizens. A body count that high requires deliberate, systemic effort. The state intentionally hunted down its own educated class, placing a specific target on the backs of Black and mestizo, or mixed-race, intellectuals. At the top of this newly formed state sat the MPLA party, led by this man, President Agostinho Neto. He and his inner circle maintained an absolute grip on the country. They used a chaotic, localized mutiny on May 27th as a convenient excuse to intentionally execute the very people who were most equipped to lead Angola into the future. The trigger for this slaughter was pulled on May 27, 1977. A political faction, allegedly led by a man named Nito Alves, launched an armed uprising in the capital, temporarily taking over the national radio station and a local prison. The mutiny was crushed in a matter of hours. The government, however, chose not to stop at arresting the ringleaders. They used the temporary chaos to wipe out an entire social class. The threshold to be marked for death was terrifyingly low. In some provinces, having a 9th grade education, what they called the 5th year of the official schooling system, was all it took to be officially labeled a class enemy. Those who weren't shot immediately were sent to a network of concentration camps like Tari, Kalunda, and São Nicolau. There, they faced starvation and brutal interrogation methods like Thengelelo. A victim's hands and feet were tied behind their back, connected by wet ropes to their testicles. A tourniquet was then tightened at the temples to restrict blood flow to the brain, causing immense physical agony. Rounding up anyone who could read a book, parse a policy, or question a leader achieved something far darker than securing borders. The state performed a societal lobotomy. For decades, rumors circulated that foreign intelligence agencies, like the CIA or the former Portuguese colonial masters, secretly pulled the strings behind the massacre. The historical record does not support that. Soviet and Cuban forces were heavily present in Angola at the time, and their military muscle definitely kept Neto's regime intact, but the Soviets actually stayed neutral during the mutiny. The subsequent purge was entirely a localized, internal Angolan operation. There is also a persistent myth that President Neto was a passive figurehead, manipulated by the bloodthirsty radicals in his own party. The evidence points to active participation. Neto bypassed official commissions of inquiry. During one meeting with foreign diplomats discussing the mass arrests, he simply stood up and walked out, allowing the executions to proceed without him having to answer for them. The MPLA leadership operated with complete, ruthless agency. They were fully aware and in control of the slaughter of their own citizens. To understand how a government could do this, you have to look at where that government was formed, in the jungles, known as as matas, during the long guerrilla war against Portugal. In those remote military camps, the MPLA developed a deeply anti-intellectual culture. Rural fighters inherently distrusted the educated urban students joining their ranks. When internal dissent arose, it was routinely resolved with a firing squad. That lethal, insular mentality might hold a rebel faction together in the bush. It is completely incompatible with governing an independent nation that desperately needs doctors, engineers, and administrators. When the leadership took power in Luanda, they brought the jungle with them. The May 27 massacre was the inevitable result of applying a paranoid guerrilla playbook to the machinery of a modern state. The immediate fallout of murdering the educated class was devastating. In a matter of months, Angola lost the exact professionals it needed to manage its economy, staff its hospitals, and run its schools. Entire university classes vanished. Operating a complex urban infrastructure, managing transit networks, trade, and civil services requires capable managers. The capital was suddenly stripped of its brightest minds. But the MPLA accepted this trade-off. They willingly destroyed their nation's operational capacity because they received absolute, uncontested political control in return. The state secured its survival only by cannibalizing its own future. Today, that grim transaction remains intact. There have been no truth commissions. The mass graves holding tens of thousands of bodies have never been unearthed. The families still have no answers. The architects of the 1977 slaughter were never punished. They promoted themselves, transitioning from armed factionalists into the generals and ministers of the modern state. Because the massacre went entirely unpunished, it cemented a lasting culture of fear. For decades, speaking about the 27th of May was strictly taboo, creating an environment where silence is the safest option. The purge of 1977 never truly ended. It evolved from a bloody massacre into the invisible, silent foundation of modern Angolan autocracy.